Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. In this video I'd like to give you guys an update on my Amaryllis plants. So two of them are in full bloom at the moment and are looking really great. The third one is struggling somewhat, and I'll explain why that's been struggling, and I've actually referenced it in a previous video. I'll leave an iCard in the top right of the screen now so you can have a look at that to learn a bit more about the history of why that one's struggling. But these two other ones are looking absolutely fantastic. So the one on the right is actually the mother of the one on the left. It had a baby bulb coming off of it about 2 years ago. I removed that bulb and this is the one that's grown from it. So this is probably this is the second year this has flowered. When it flowered last year it only had 2 flowers. This year it was actually going to have 3 flowers, but there was a slight accident with the windowsill. This was basically growing on the windowsill. When the curtain was opened, one of the flowers was broken off and killed. So you can see the 2 flowers there. There was this third one as well, and it was just connected at the back right there, but unfortunately it was snapped off where the curtain was drawn across. So there's only 2 flowers on that one this year, but it did have 2 flowers last year and it would have had 3 this year. So maybe next year we might get a 4-flower spike, or we might get a double spike, but I think we'll probably get a 4-flowered spike, and then the year after that we'll probably get 2 spikes. So it seems to be getting an extra flower every year. This one on the right always does really well. It looks like we're going to get 8 flowers this year. I don't know how obvious it is on the camera, but there's 4 flowers on this one here. I'll rotate it slightly so you can see. And there is actually 4 flowers on that spike there. And there's another one coming up on the side, and that's also got 4 flowers. So it's looking really good this year. And 8 flowers. I think the last 2 or 3 years this plant has managed to have 8 flowers. It tends to vary whether they both spikes flower at the same time or not. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. This year they haven't, but I think we're going to have a small bit of overlap this year. I quite like it when they don't flower at the same time, because that way they don't get too close to each other, but also I get a longer flowering period. So when this one's just starting to go over, this one is just coming up into its own, and that then gives me a nice long flowering period. When they do flower at the same time, it does look absolutely stunning though, and I get loads and loads of flowers. But the problem with that is the flowers don't last for as long. The flower period is much shorter, even though it looks much nicer. So they're both quite happy, these plants. I'm quite happy with how they've done. I'll pan down now so you can see them at the base. The bulbs have shrunk because they've put all the energy into flowering. Particularly the one on the right has really shrunk. It's put up 2 flower spikes. The one on the left was already a bit of a smaller bulb, so there's not much difference there. And this bulb in the middle here, this is the one I've been having some problems with. As I said in the previous video, it's not really grown at all in the last 2 years. It hasn't flowered for 2 years either, and so it's just been struggling to put the growth out. The one time it did flower, it was very disjointed, the flower, as if it was struggling to come out because it was too much pressure. So I cut off quite a lot at the top, which was a lot of dead material and compacted plant material. I then split down the sides as well to try and relieve some of the pressure. Doesn't seem to have helped much. The growth coming out of this is still very slow. I would have expected some stronger growth. So we'll just have to see how this does. The last few years it's really not done much, and it looks like this might be the last year that this survives. We'll see how it does though. I'll keep looking after it. Hopefully we're going to get some strong growth out of this, and they can start fattening the bulb up and we'll get some flowers again in a few years. It's still quite a big bulb. It has shrunk somewhat since I've cut the sides. I think it's dried out a little bit. But the growth coming out the top, although it's very slow, it is healthy. So there's still a chance that we can get some flowers out of this. But I think because the growth is so slow, it's following the patterns it's done in previous years where it grows really slow and the leaves only grow about 3 or 4 inches, about 15-20 centimeters, and that's all. So hopefully we'll get some better growth this year. I'll just have to see how they do. So all the bulbs are a lot later this year than normal. It's currently the 11th of April and they're in full bloom now, which for these bulbs is quite late. These normally flower for me closer to Christmas time, or just after Christmas, kind of January, February time. The reason they were so late this year is I moved house, and these have been sitting in an unheated conservatory. The only heating they had was an electric heater to keep the frost at bay. So during the day it was probably only about 10 or 11 degrees. At night it was getting down to close to freezing. There was a touch of frost one of the nights, and has caused a lot of damage to some of my houseplants, so I'll have to give you an update on those. So whilst in that cold environment, they weren't growing much, they were pretty much dormant. The cold period they had was just after the last update I did, where you saw them just starting to grow. So they sat there for about a month, didn't do anything. I then took them, when they started to put on a little bit of growth, they were only probably about that tall coming out the bulb. I took them back to my parents' house where I'm currently staying, because I didn't want them to flower in the new house and I wouldn't be able to see them because I'm currently in quarantine over in my parents' house. So I've taken them over here so I can look after them better, and I can actually appreciate the nice flowers that are coming out of them. and in a warm house they've really grown quite fast and quite well. So I'm really happy with how they look. I'm not sure where they're going to be this summer. It depends when I can get back to my new house. I would like to have them in the conservatory because it's nice and warm there and sunny. And Amaryllis really like a lot of sunshine to then build up the energy for the next year's flowers. I'm thinking this year they're going to do better than previous years, not the flowering but the growth and the fattening up of the bulb. So because of, I'm going to have a much sunnier environment for them and a warmer environment, either a polytunnel or a conservatory, and that should fatten up the bulbs nicely, and we should get an even bigger flowering display next year. I think this one, I've never seen much more really than 8 flowers on Amaryllis, so it'll be interesting to see if this can perform better than 8 flowers. The one on the left though can certainly fatten up as its parents are much bigger. So what I'll probably do is repot that one soon. You can see down there the pot's quite small and the bulb's starting to get quite large for the pot, so that will need repotting soon. I'll wait till the flowers are finished, I'll then repot that plant. This one, the mother plant, I'm going to keep in that pot. It's done well in there the last few years. Ideally I will find a larger pot for it soon though, because although it's a nice ornamental pot, it is a little bit small for the size of the bulb. But Amaryllis don't seem to suffer too badly if you give them a small pot, but I am hoping to upgrade the pot and have that bulb being a little bit happier. So that's all for this update. I'll try and get some photos if this does open at the same time as this flower spike, and then we have 8 flowers in total in one plant, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. I suspect this will be just starting to die off when these come into full flower, so it's a bit about 50-50 whether or not I think I'm going to have both of them flowering at the same time. If they are flowering at the same time, it's only going to be for a few days, so I'll have to be quite quick and get it just before these ones die off, just as these are opening. This one's probably, looking at the development of the shoot there, I'm looking at probably another 3 or 4 days until that's fully open, and these have been open for about 2 days already. So, and these normally only last about a week, especially as it's quite warm where they are at the moment. So we'll see how it does. Even if I cool these down to slow down the decay in these ones will just slow down their opening, so it won't really help too much. But there is one other interesting thing that's happened this year, and that's this one on the baby flower. It's actually developed an unusual white streak. So you can see there on the top right of the flower there's quite a nice white streak on there. That's some kind of damage that's occurred to the flower probably when it was developing. It's something you see in some of the cultivars. Some of the cultivars actually have it where there's white streaks on the flowers. This cultivar has just always been a straight up red flower. So I've never had white streaks before, but I'm not too bothered as long as the flower isn't deformed and the plant's still happy. It's quite nice to have a bit of a change every now and again to the flowers. So I've got an unusual white stripe there. It might have been because we had it so cold and there was that touch of frost. It might have just damaged the development slightly, and it's damaged some of the cells that are producing the red pigment, so it's just gone white. Basically, if a plant's gone white, when you have a variegated plant, sometimes it's cream coloured, often white, it means there's no chlorophyll. Or in this example, because it's a flower, there's not chlorophyll, it's actually pigment in there for the flower. So for some reason the pigment's gone and we just ended up with a nice white colour. But it's an interesting streak, and it will also be interesting to see if this happens again next year or not. I suspect it won't. And there is actually a tiny bit of white flecking on this one over here. You can see just on the top there's a slight white fleck. Again, I suspect that's from the cold it's had, and that's given it the white coloration there, but that will probably be gone next year. So that's all for this update. Hopefully I'll give you guys another update when I'm going to be repotting the one on the left, and it'll be good if I can find a nice larger pot for the one on the right, as that one's been in that small pot probably for about 5 or 6 years now, and it could really do with a bigger pot. I have changed the soil a couple of times, and that's helped it to stay vigorous, and it's always flowered fantastically for me, that one. That's always been the best bulb by far. Always had a double spike, always had at least 5 or 6 flowers, but most years 8 flowers, so I'm really happy with that bulb. As for this one down here, it's the same variety, just plain red flower, but it's really been struggling, so I would like to try and get that fixed. We'll see how it goes. I'm not too hopeful for this one, but I'll give you guys an update on that as well if it does come through. So that's all for this update, and as I say, I'll give you guys an update in a few months' time when I get to the repotting stage.